So again, good afternoon. I want to begin by, of course, acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Kaurna people, and pay my respects to all elders, past, present, and emerging. I recognize their continued connection to land, waters, and culture, and it's a privilege to gather on this country to talk about a future shaped by technology, knowledge, and community. So thank you for joining us today. It's amazing, wonderful to see such a strong turnout. I think we have, what, 80 people here, maybe more? That's excellent. When so many people show up to talk about women in tech, it means the conversation is alive. And it should be. Not sure if that's good or bad, but it should be. We will still make up only 28% of the STEM workforce in Australia, with only 20% female representation in leadership positions and a 14% pay gap. These numbers are better than global averages, to be honest. So some people might go and think, well, Australia is doing well. Those numbers are good enough. I disagree. We have challenges, but we don't want a good enough, do we? We want great. We want awesome. We want fair. And we are entitled to all of them. So, just to give you a bit of background, I've worked in tech my entire life. I led teams in engineering, bank, government, big tech, companies like Microsoft and Amazon, and I'm now back to the academia. And I've done that in 2 countries, Brazil and Australia. I'm an Australian citizen now, and I was born and raised in Brazil. So, I tick a couple of boxes in the inclusion conversation. I know very well what I'm talking about. Anyway, through it all, I've had some experiences that many of you probably had or have had at some point. For example, walk into a room where I was the only woman, or the only one of 2 or 3, maybe, right? Sometimes I was the only woman with a voice. Sometimes the only person asking the uncomfortable questions, because I had a different perspective, right? And sometimes, that's a funny one, but just by being there, I would make others uncomfortable. Not that I care, but it's true. Anyway, I once had, I can tell you many more stories, but I'll restrict to one. I once had a staff member, a man, a bit older than me, right? We had a one-on-one meeting, and he looked at me and said, I could be your boss. And I was like, too bad, you're not. Let's move on. Move on or move out. Of course, I didn't say that, but the message was kind of clear. So, as you can see, it's been an interesting journey, right? Back when I started, things were harder, really harder. But we have laws now, we have policies, and they are here to back us up, and you have to take that space. Don't be afraid, use them, use them. You are entitled to respect. If anyone is not treating you as you should, complain. Raise your voice, right? There are a lot of people out there who want to be there for you. You must find them, you must let them show. But most of all, you must be yourself, be your genuine self. And you must have an opportunity to thrive. So use the protections they are there. And let me be very honest. At the end of the day, if you complain or say anything that, you feel uncomfortable and, I don't know, in the worst case scenario, you decide the best way is for you to leave, that's fine. There's always another job out there. Of all the challenges of being a woman in tech, employability is not one of them, right? There are many good jobs out there, relatively low stress, and well paid. So you have no reason to be afraid. That's not to say that you should not fight for respect and equality and everything that are entitled in the company you're in. I'm just saying there's no reason to be too concerned. There's always another way. There's always a better way. And you certainly can find an environment to thrive. You owe it to yourself to find an environment where you can thrive. Now, you don't need to look or sound a certain way to work in tech. Ask questions, challenge the status quo, challenge yourself. And if you've ever been curious about tech but feel like, oh, that's not for me, I'm a woman, or whatever. Well, it is for you, I promise you. If you wanna, it is for you. It's for everyone. And it must be for everyone. And for the folks in the room who are in a position to influence the status quo, right, for the bosses in the room, you must, regardless of your gender. If you're in a position to make it better for others, you must. It's your social responsibility. Because when I talk about inclusion, I'm not talking only about policies or ideas. I'm talking about who gets listened to, who gets to lead, who gets a second chance, right? Who is seen as good enough and who is seen as great. And most importantly, who isn't. You are in a meeting, one of the people in the room is cutting off a shyer employee, intervene. It's your duty. It is your duty. Real inclusion is not just about making space. It's about changing the room. It's about saying out loud to everyone, you belong here. Your ideas belong here. And it's about backing that up with action by providing mentoring, sponsorship, and opportunities that are not just performative. I've seen many companies going there and say, look at our rankings, look at our numbers, how better they are. But the people on the ground, they don't feel included. So you're not doing a good job, okay? It goes both ways. If you're in a position of power, you must help. If you're not, you must fight for your space. But in saying all that, I don't want to discourage you at all. I love this career. I've been here working this, as I said, my whole life. And a lot of the great things that happened to me was because of my choice to be a woman in tech. And with that, it's my absolute pleasure to officially open Tech for Every Woman. For every woman. May this event remind you that tech is broader than you think, that your perspective is needed, and that change happens when we show up. And the more we show up, the better it becomes. So show up and shine. Thank you.
Two good questions. What an absolute honour. So it's fabulous for this university to have a Pro Vice Chancellor of Research, Enterprise and Infrastructure who comes from a technology background. I'm your host this afternoon. My name is Catherine Anderson. I head up Innovation Central Adelaide, which is a strategic partnership between Flinders University and CISCO, global giant CISCO. My next task is to introduce you. Oh, sorry, a couple of bits of housekeeping. I know that this is a Flinders University focused event. If you don't know, the bathrooms are just behind us in the corridor here. Should we need to evacuate the building, let's hope not. We will hear the usual whoop whoops, followed by beep beeps, followed by the whoop whoops. We'll proceed down the stairs and out towards the car park here. Thank you once again, Fabiana, for such a wonderful welcome. Excuse me. The event today is kind of conversational. We'll have a bit of time for a bit of a bite to eat and a nice conversation with each other. So please get to know your colleagues. What we wanted to do was to bring colleagues from across the university, whether you work in tech, whether you work with tech, or whether you are the tech curious. I would like to now introduce our keynote speaker to you today. So Vanessa Sulikowski is a distinguished solutions engineer with 30 years in the ICT industry. Since joining CISCO in 2000, she has become a trusted advisor in collaboration technology across Asia Pacific, and those collaboration technologies are the sort of things that we use every day. She is a regular presenter at Global Conference CISCO live. I think you've just come back fairly recently from the US, from San Diego. She's a Distinguished Speaker Hall of Fame. I've heard Vanessa speak at length today. We've got just a tiny snippet of her personal story for you. She's a really engaging speaker. She knows her stuff. I'm going to get out of the way and hand the mic to you, Vanessa.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. It's wonderful to be here today, and thanks for the invitation. And what I want to do is just share with you a little bit about my story, being a woman in tech for the last 35 years. And where I'm going to start towards the end, but then I'm going to circle back. And I want to share with you some of the highs, some of the lows, some of the struggles, some of the support that I had, and how I actually managed to get to be as successful as I am, but that I never would have dreamed that I could have. Now, my title is Distinguished Solutions Engineer. It's a little bit of a nebulous title, but I will explain what that is. Now, I'm just shy a couple of months of 25 years at CISCO. And CISCO has about 80,000 plus permanent employees worldwide, right across the globe. So we've got offices in most of the key countries in the world. And we've got two key organisations. We've got one organisation that is an internal organisation, which includes all the things you'd expect, the HR, finance, all of those sorts of things. But it also includes our engineers that create the CISCO products and solutions. So the hardware engineers, software engineers, design engineers, UI engineers. And then we have another organisation, which is our customer-facing organisation. And there we have engineers like myself, that when I joined CISCO, we were called systems engineers, and over 25 years, that title has evolved to solution engineers. And our job as technologists is to go in, work with our customers on their requirements. So what do they need from technology? And we design for them, we architect, we come up with a solution that is going to meet their different needs. And we get to talk to them about all sorts of things when it comes to technology. Now, Distinguished Solutions Engineer. With our systems engineers, you, just like in any organisation, you get promotions on merit and you go up, different levels, different grades, become more senior, all sorts of different titles. And in CISCO, that is exactly the same, and you can be promoted to a certain level. But once you get to a certain level, to become the next, would be the next level of engineering, is no longer a process of traditional promotion on merit and of your impact to the business. This now is a submission that is done to a global board, and we have a principal engineer and we have a distinguished engineer. So about 9 years or so ago, I became the first female worldwide to achieve Distinguished Solutions Engineer in our customer-facing organisation. Now, I'm going to tell you it was not easy. I had a lot of support along the way. There were a lot of challenges, but I want to circle back and tell you a little bit about that journey. It was probably one of my proudest moments, but there was a long and winding road to get there. And what it has done is it's opened up the things that I do for CISCO. So I'm now involved if we do key acquisitions of startups, of companies. I'm involved when we are introducing a new technology and do NDA sessions on that technology. I work with our key customers, and as Catherine mentioned, I present at our CISCO events, but also industry and technology events all around the world. Now, how I got here? So I'm actually a little girl from Newcastle. So I grew up in Newcastle, so I'm a country girl. And in 1990, I did a computer science degree at the University of Newcastle. Now, even then, there wasn't that many females. I was one of 2 females and 250 guys that did computer science that year. I went through, I absolutely loved computer science. I had this moment in my first year at university towards the end. My parents decided to move out and they moved to Port Macquarie. And so it meant I had to get a job. And I was very fortunate. I got a job in technology. My first job was building XT and AT computers, for any of you that remember that era of building clone computers. And this organisation that I worked for, I moved to a reduced program on my computer science, but by that I did 3 subjects instead of 4. I got introduced to networking technology because those computers then needed to be networked together, and we actually had the contract for the University of Newcastle. And that was when my love affair with CISCO and networking technology started. Now, when I finished my undergrad degree, I was one of only 2 people that were invited to do honours on a merging area, which was information science and networking. And so I jumped at the chance to do that. And I got a job managing a network for a pathology company that had head office in Newcastle, but had 35 sites all up the north coast of New South Wales. And I enjoyed managing those networks. They got acquired by a very big Australian company, and they convinced me to move to Sydney. Right, that was a big step for a girl from Newcastle. I didn't want to move to the big smoke, but I'm glad I did. I then looked after their 350 Australian-wide network sites, and after a year or 2, they decided to move IT to Melbourne, and I said, yeah, nah. Sydney was as far as I wanted to move from Newcastle. I was still young, and I hadn't really seen the world, and all of my family, my friends were still in Newcastle. They made most of my IT team redundant. They didn't give me that choice. Yes, be careful of how successful you are at what you do. But my CISCO account manager at the time said there's a systems engineering role going at CISCO. Now, to give you a perspective of when this was 2000. The .com and the internet was exploding. This was the heyday of networking, and it was extremely competitive. It was 6 interviews and a 2-hour exam to get into CISCO. I was competing against so many people that wanted to get into the networking arena and such a great prestigious networking company. I was successful, and I became the first female systems engineer in Australia and New Zealand. Now, that first year was tough. And I'm going to tell you, it was like being this young petite girl and trying to barge into the AFL locker room, right? It wasn't completely hostile, but it wasn't that welcoming. And I was like a fish out of water to these guys, right? They had a cohesion, they had the way they worked, and I didn't really fit the mold at the time. And so I was a great network engineer, but they were great network engineers as well. I had some of the different teams that I worked with that really welcomed the different perspective that I could bring, the different conversations that I could have, the fact that I could actually look at things a little bit differently. But a lot of them still had that mindset of, well, you know, I'm used to the engineers, the male engineers that I'm working with, and so a lot of those older account managers really it wasn't their first choice to work with me as the systems engineer on their customers. Now, I had this opportunity accidentally land in my lap that gave me this opportunity to thrive and differentiate myself from my peers. So about a year in, CISCO acquired a company called Celsius. Now, Celsius created the first IP telephony devices, right? And this was, back then, was a huge shift and a big risk in what was over 100-year industry. Everybody had PABX, PBX phones, digital and analog. It was reliable, and this was something that not many people wanted to play around with. So all of the guys in my team, my engineering manager needed somebody to specialise in it. All of the guys in my team went, no, that's too risky, you know, it's going to be a hard slog, you're not going to get any of the customers wanting to get on board with this. And I was there and I thought, wow, this is such an opportunity to learn something brand new. And yes, it might be a risk, but it sounds to me like it's a risk worth taking. So I was the only one that put up their hand. I then learned all about the IP telephony technology. I learned all of the reasons why this was going to be a game changer for our customers. And I actually became the local expert right across Australia. And so I then went and worked on customers right around the Australian and New Zealand region, and went from strength to strength. And so I became the SME, and then people started jumping on and wanting to learn about the technology. Our partner organisations, which are the people that install CISCO technology and support it for our customers, they all started learning the technology as well. And I was there, sitting right there as the foremost expert in Australia, which was a phenomenal place to be. Now, around that 2005 timeframe, CISCO in Australia loves being the guinea pigs for technology. And so Australia actually became the first region in the world to be #1 in IP telephony. And then we actually expanded that to enterprise telephony. But what happened is I found, you know, everybody else was jumping on and they were learning the technology. They were becoming experts in the technology as well. And so lo and behold, I was a great voice and unified communications engineer, but there was lots of others great voice and unified communications engineers. At that time, CISCO introduced a new exam. So we have something some of you may have heard of, a CCIE, or CISCO Internetworking Expert exam, which is an 8-hour lab that you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. This thing is crazy hard. And they decided to create one on voice. And so I set myself a task. I wanted to be one of the first ones in the Asia Pacific region to actually tackle this thing and pass this 8-hour practical exam, because basically they put you in a room and you have to build it, and they purposely put traps there. And so I became the first voice CCIE across our region, and so suddenly I was in massive demand again. Now, about the same time, and I'm going to introduce Richard, who is going to be on your panel, and he has been a critical piece of my career journey. He has been my colleague, he has been my mentor, he has been my sponsor, and ultimately for over 10 years he was my manager. And around the same time he was living in the UK, he moved to Singapore. And so we became colleagues. Now, this was a pivotal moment for me because he had been working in the UK, been working for CISCO in the UK, had built up a global network there, moved over to Singapore, and he started expanding in this region. And he started introducing me to all of the people he knew across the globe. He also saw that I was such a passionate technology presenter just like he was. And so he found opportunities for us to present at big events together. One of the first ones was over in France. We got to present at a conference in Cannes. And which was a wonderful place to go for my first international conference back then in 2005, and then we travelled the world together. Now, CISCO recognises its top talent and gives us training opportunities. One of the opportunities that they give us is to go to what they call a senior technical leadership development program. Right, and they put you in a room for 3 days, throw a lot of different scenarios at you, do some aptitude tests, and it's really to sort of map out what is your career path going to be. Now, something that became very obvious early on is Richard was always destined to be an extremely phenomenal people leader. Now, me, not so much. All the aptitude tests show that I was more of an engineer. My value was in front of our customers. My value was building and designing solutions. And so what happened not long after that, Richard actually became my manager. And as we went through, he gave me a lot of the opportunities. I worked on a lot of the accounts that he worked on. We'd actually done a lot of the events together, and so I now started taking the lead on all of those and bringing other engineers to be colleagues and support me, because one person can't do it all. Now, we had some really interesting conversations about career goals and career paths. And once I'd got to the top level that he could promote me on the merit and all the value that I was providing to our customers and to CISCO, he said, "What next?" And I made a joke. And I made a joke in saying, I think I might want to go for distinguished engineer. And the reason it was such a joke is that if you'd asked me 5 years prior to that, would I ever have been a distinguished engineer, I would have said there is no way in hell that I would actually get there. And because there were no females. And to be honest, there was hardly any outside of the US. We had one in Australia. There was a couple in Europe. And it just wasn't something that seemed attainable, especially for someone living over here in Australia. And he floored me, and he really floored me by, he actually looked at me, and I was still joking, and he said, out of everyone in the team, you're the one that actually might get there, right? And his belief was more than my belief. And you know what that did? It made me think, and it actually lit a fire in my belly. It made me realise, wow, I could maybe do this. Now, then we were so naive, we didn't realise the process and what you needed to do. When we looked at the criteria, I nearly changed my mind. There's a whole raft of stuff that you need to do, and it's like putting in a thesis. It is a submission to a board that evaluates you on your value to CISCO, your value to our customers, your industry impact, your innovation levels, your work on standards bodies, so many sponsorship from inside CISCO and outside of CISCO, and at a really high level. They want executive sponsorship. We put together a package which we thought was good. We were so naive, right? We put this in. We thought, I might actually get there. They came back and went, yeah, not even close. All right. And it was a massive blow. And I have to say, it was like a punch in the guts. And I suddenly realised, wow, okay, yeah, maybe this isn't attainable. And so I fell in a big heap. Richard really had to pick me up. There was tears, there was tantrums, there was everything. And so I said, yeah, that's it, right? No, not going to do it. He let me rest and just keep doing what I do, and out there in front of customers and making a difference in the way that I was doing every day. And then a couple of months later, he broached it again, and he said, okay, let's talk about this. are you going to do it? And I went, okay, all right, let's look at it. And what was good is they give you a gap analysis, right? And they tell you, why you did. And it was never a no. It was a not yet, right? There was the potential there that this is what you need to do, right? And there was a lot of things I needed to do. But one thing, and I got some really good advice, and we then took that and ran with it, is in that first package, I detailed everything I did, right? And when I had some big wins, and I was critical to the fact that CISCO became #1 in IP telephony here and enterprise telephony, and all the once we got the first big bank, all of the big banks came on, and then it was the universities, and then it was all the different industries. But what we had detailed is just all of that, and then we detailed everything I'd done. And it showed how hard I worked and some of the successes that I had. But what it didn't show was, why was I different from my colleagues? What differentiated me? What distinguished me from my colleagues? And so we took a completely different tack. And so we went back, and I had to find a niche. I had to find something that could differentiate me, not just locally, but globally. And right at that time, Australia, again, being the guinea pigs that we are, started moving to open plan and activity-based working. We started moving away from cubes. We started looking at the way people interact in a workplace differently. And I thought, wow, this is something that isn't ever going to be successful without technology. And so I jumped on it. And I not only thought of connecting all the dots, I worked with our business units on changes we needed to make to technology, industry events that I could present at on workplace technology and workplace transformation. And I really became the global expert in this area, because it would be years, actually it took COVID for the US to actually realise that there is a different way of people interacting in a workplace. And so that, and I started doing some work on standards bodies, the IETF, IEEE, presenting at industry conferences, and slowly but surely, with Richard's backing, because he had to back me doing these activities that were outside of my day-to-day job, we got through the criteria. We put in another package, and this time we were very, very considered in that package, and we also got a lot of feedback. We went out, I got sponsors, I got mentors outside of the area. I mentored people, and all of that went in there. And so we went up again. I was nowhere near as confident the second time, but I realised I'd done something differently. And so when they announced it globally at our Las Vegas conference for 25,000 people, was probably one of the proudest moments in my life. And it really is the story of how a little girl from Newcastle managed to become the first female distinguished engineer worldwide in our customer organisation.
If that doesn't make all of us feel a little bit emotional, I don't know what does. Oh my gosh, what a proud moment. I now have the pleasure of working with your Richard. I tend to call him my Richard these days.
He's your Richard now.
So Richard Dodsworth is actually the Innovation Central Adelaide Tech Advisor. So we actually have the pleasure and the privilege of having him as part of our organisation. Vanessa, thank you so much. That was such a warm and engaging journey to take us on from Newcastle to the global stage. Oh my gosh, I cannot imagine that moment. It must have just, yeah. Thank you for bringing us so much into that world. Let's give another round of applause. I think that deserves it. We're going to move into a bit of a panel session now. Before I do, I would also like to just simply acknowledge our CISCO Research Chair in Digital Health, who is in the room with us as well, Professor Trish Williams. CISCO is a really good partner to this university, and that's not a sales pitch. That's genuinely, it's the real deal. They're a strategic partner to this university. Of course, we use CISCO technologies in across the university, but we use other technologies as well. Universities do, but really delighted to have that support. Our panel just now is going to open up a little bit further into the questions. I'm going to actually bounce back a couple here. So we did ask, and you've all got it on your badges, on your name badges, we asked you to tell us about what interests you in technology, what are you currently kind of looking at. And we've got a bit of a mix of kind of things, and thanks, Belle, for doing the word cloud. Our conversation now is going to move quite broadly, and we do have a large panel. We have a large panel. I'm going to invite everybody up to grab a seat of your choice. Vanessa, please come and join us up on the... And you're welcome to keep the same mic if you like. It's up to you. Tanya Lehman, I'll go from the far side towards me. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of why people are on the panel. And before I do that, I'm going to do a quick check of the people in the room. So I spoke earlier on about women in tech, women who work in tech, women who work with tech, and those of us who are tech curious. So, and you know what? If you're a man in the room today, you can be counted as a woman in tech or woman and tech if you like. We'll be inclusive. If you are working in technology, give us a wave. If you're working with technology, give us a wave. What's the distinction, right? Interesting. And if you're tech curious, give us a wave. I was hoping that would be absolutely everybody. Come on, it's everybody, right? We're all tech curious. Let's do it again. If you are tech curious, give us a wave. Okay, perfect. So, Tanya Lehman, Vanessa we've met. Tanya Lehman, who is the next in the red, is your Dean of Law at Flinders University and works in the legal systems as a lawyer, but with how technology impacts law and legal systems. Richard, I have introduced to you already as our tech advisor. What have we got next? We have Catherine. You guys are sat in the order. You pretty much have, I think. So, Cassie Hames works for Nukon and is part of the Tonsley Innovation District. Through that, she is also a tech developer and has developed some fabulous tech to enable people who are sight impaired to navigate public transport. Alicia Mitchell is... Oh, okay, we've mixed up a little bit. Oh, that's okay. Alicia Mitchell is one of our PhDs here with the Medical Device Research Institute. Kirsty Mosley works with IDS, our IT people, and Stephen Blakeney works with MDPP. Did I end up with the chair? I did. I'm right in the middle. Do you know what? I'm going to stand here because it just makes it easier for me to sort of field questions and go through. So we're going to do a sort of a fairly free form kind of question. I've sparked some thoughts and we'll kind of talk around those. And obviously with such a large panel, we will keep answers reasonably brief and you can follow up a little bit further. Kirsty, you and I have had a bit of a chat before now, and I know that you have a career that started out in marketing and communications, and you've moved from that point to working with IDS in a senior leadership role. And I'm hoping that you can talk to us a little bit about that transition, but also what are the transitions that you see in the world of technology and in the world of work with technology and in your own journey as well.
Yeah, hi.
All right, just flick it. Yeah,
hi. So my career has kind of really done a complete hook turn, essentially. I was in marketing, communications, event management, PR, that sort of stuff for a long time, and then made the move to Flinders University nearly 5 years ago to come into an IT area. But that was a really deliberate move because I came here to bring my experience around CX and UX and UI and to bring that kind of focus on customer to the IT area in IDS at Flinders. The changes that I've seen though is that when I started in marketing, we had like printouts of logos, right, which were called bromides, and we'd attach them to a piece of paper and then they'd go off to the printer and we'd sign that off manually and all that sort of stuff, right? And I think we all know that from a women's perspective, those types of roles, marketing coordinators, marketing officers, human resource officers, financial officers, are more traditionally filled by women, and they have a higher number of women in those types of roles. Probably the biggest change I've seen is those roles are actually now becoming technology roles. So if you're moving into marketing now, you really, or even communications and even event management, you really need to be really tech savvy, and you need to be using technology as part of your role. And whether that's actually how you do your job on a day-to-day basis, or whether that's how your technology helps you do your job, if that makes sense. So, you know, we're seeing a proliferation now of AI, and I can imagine that even in the CX field, I've got one of my staff members here today who did a course at IDEO in how AI can help us in a customer experience and help us understand synthesised data and that we get from customers. So the change for me has been that women actually need to start to embrace technology. You know, previously our roles might have been a lot more hands-on and a lot more analogue, and now they're very digital, and we need to lean into that and really embrace it. And that's probably the biggest change, and I think we see that across a lot of those traditional women roles. From my perspective, I came into IT at IDS very much coming from a CX, human-centred design background in my more recent role before I came into IDS. And I had to think about how I applied that from a technology sense as well. So that's probably been the biggest shift from my perspective, not just in my career, but also in seeing how these roles operate in the actual environment now. Very much a technology focus.
Thank you. And so with IDS, if you explain your role with IDS is still on that forefront of the experience that we as Flinders University have with our technology systems.
Yeah, absolutely. So I look after all of our platforms and applications teams. I also look after our centrally managed capabilities. So I have like architecture and integration, data and AI. I also have digital experience in my team, governance and communications. But what I bring to my role at IDS is a real customer-centric perspective. So I'm consistently thinking about how the digital experience affects probably everybody in this room who engages with Flinders. If you are using technology or engaging with Flinders, you're using something that probably one of my team members is managing or implementing or doing, or one of my colleagues. So, you know, even to the point where the microphone's working today, and that was done by our AV team who were here a bit earlier. So we're always thinking about how we can engage with our customers and align our services and our experiences to what the customer's looking for.
Thank you. That's brilliant. You know, when we've labelled this event "Women" or "Tech for All Women," you know, this is the question that we're asking: is it about having more women in technology? Or is it having more women who are engaging with technology? Tanya, I'm going to throw our next question to you, and likewise, we've had some conversations around the changes in our student body and the changes in expectations of what your career might be in a non-technical or a perceived non-technical career. We're almost at the point where all careers are, to a degree, technical or technological. If women want to change the world and working in law, you know, there are people who want to perhaps change the world for themselves by a nice high salary, but there are people drawn to law who want to change the world for the world. They want to change the world for the better. Can you talk us through your experiences and your reflections on how technology intersects with the field of law and what you're seeing in the student body, in research and in your work?
Yeah, so thank you, Catherine, and I do feel like I'm the person here on false pretences as being a lawyer in a room full of people who are probably a lot more tech-focused than I am. I might answer your question by saying there's two strands to it. One is how technology is changing what lawyers do and how they do it. And the other is the new emerging areas where technology is being developed that really need governance and guardrails to help engender trust in the community about how people are going to interact with that technology. So that second stream is an area where I've done some research, so researching on the legal implications of driverless cars, fully automated vehicles. I've done some work on sex robots. I've done some work on ovulation apps. I've done some work on deep fakes. And so these are all emerging areas, and one of the areas I'm thinking about now is neurotechnologies, and particularly how in some parts of the world EEGs are being used to convict people of murder, for example. And so thinking about how we might use new technologies in our community, but thinking about how the law needs to be there to provide that governance. Way back in 2010, when I got my first continuing position here at Flinders, I started talking about the impact of technology on the legal profession, and I was talking about that at various conferences. And to be honest, everyone said, "Oh, can you stop talking about that? That's just rubbish. It's never going to happen." And now, 15 years later, I sit on the Law Council's Futures Committee, so that's a national committee. I also sit on the very recently put together Law Society of South Australia's Artificial Intelligence and Data Privacy Committee, and I've been trying to get their Legal Technology Committee to move now for a number of years. And so what I'm seeing in my own discipline, which is changing massively in its own demographics, so we now have 70% commencing female students who say they choose law because they don't like tech. They don't like the STEM topic, so they come and do a topic, a subject like ours, and I say, well, think again. And at Flinders in 2019, we were the first law school in Australia who made a core topic for all law students where they had to engage with technology. And in 2020, originally we did that with a proprietary company, but since 2020, all of our students have done a topic where they've learnt to code and they've built a number, over 70 simple software applications for not-for-profits. Now, our law students say, this is not what I came to do law for. And we say to them, this is where the world's going. So you need to get that tech-curious, tech mindset. And even if you never want to do this again, you need to understand how the tech is working under the hood, to use a colloquialism, so that you can think about the legal implications. So even in something that seems a long way away from technology, we are talking to our students all the time about the need to understand how the world is changing and understand the opportunities that are there too. It's certainly for me, those areas of interest for me have opened up because no one else has been talking about them. So it's a great way to jump in.
That is a great way to jump in. I love that notion of exactly that, finding what's not being served, what's the space that's not being served. But also this fact that often when we talk about women in technology, and Fabiana brought us across some statistics in her welcome to the event. We often think about women working in technology, and where do we see women in technology? What do we see as the technology roles for women, with women, and of women? And we've now had two of our panellists who've kind of cracked that open and said, well, actually, we see technology in marketing and communications, and we see technology in law. I'd like to throw it over to something that might sound a little bit more technological, but to open up this next question for you, Stephen, working with the Medical Devices Partnering Program. Where do we see women in tech and where do we not? But particularly with MDPP and thinking about an area like femtech, what do we see in femtech and who leads femtech?
So I actually chaired a panel session for MTB Connect a few months, probably a year ago now. Thanks, mate.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Probably about 12 months ago now, which was on femtech. But I guess before I talk about that, so I've been with MDPP for 6 years. Probably seen about 500 applications in that time, and we have a surprising number of men who come to us with sort of reporting issues on things like corpuscopes for pap smears or speculums or all gynecological type tools, and it's surprising how many men bring those to us. And I would say that I guess in the medtech sector we've probably had a pretty bad track record of so we had, I guess, of all the big scandals that we've had, so we've had the breast implant scandal, we've had the pelvic mesh implant scandal, and I guess you could probably directly correlate that to the fact that we don't have enough diversity in the engineering skills that we have when we're developing some of those technologies, because can't possibly develop technology if you don't fully understand the application. So I think that's a really important reason for why we need more female representation, particularly in medtech. That said, I think medtech probably does a lot better than most sectors. It's something where I think there's the element of helping and doing good for people. So as engineering goes, you get a lot fewer engineers. Well, so when I studied engineering, we had about 100 people on my course, and I think 4 were girls. But I think biomedical engineering, the parity is far better in terms of ratios. I guess we do, so South Australia in particular has some really amazing femtech. So we've got someone working on a IUD for pelvic pain. We've got someone who's working on a bioabsorbable pelvic mesh implant. We've got some amazing people. Whether the resources, so that sort of comes from a research perspective. We probably struggle a little bit on some of the research translation and the support to turn some of that amazing research into technology, and that's probably an area we could be a little bit better with. But yeah.
Thank you. So I think that note about representation is really important, and thinking about that you know, are our communities that are designing, developing, delivering the technologies for us, are those engineering communities themselves representative of the people who are going to be using these products? And that kind of brings us to this, and Vanessa, you spoke quite a lot about the champions, and Fabiana spoke to us about champions. What I've heard so far is, I guess, 2 sides. One of that is to be your own champion, and I was, really loved some of the things that Fabiana was saying around being your own champion and standing up and stepping forward. And Vanessa, you've spoken to us also about Richard's role as champion. And I'm going to actually put him on the hot seat now. Let's put him on the hot seat. Talk to us, Richard, about how important champions of change are. And feel welcome to speak about even your own personal champions, but particularly if you're in a position of leadership or visibility, how important are those champions of change from that leadership perspective?
Well, that's a big question. So harking back to Vanessa's story, and it was very humbling to hear that story being told, by the way. So, but I think to the question about how do you make that happen, and whether it has to be someone in a leadership role, I don't think so. I think everybody has the opportunity to see fairness and to act upon it. And I think in Vanessa's case, I'll just go back to that story. When we were colleagues, we were peers working together, I just happened to have had a bit more of a network developed over the time before I met her. And it just seemed natural to bring someone along who was very capable, who needed to get outside of Australia and to expose that great talent to the broader world that I had the opportunity to work in. And so I wasn't a leader at that point. I was a peer. I had no authority, but I just felt it was the right thing to do, to bring someone along and introduce them and basically make my life easier by having someone else to share the load in presentations and do the work that I was doing at a regional level. So first of all, I say it's not about leadership. In terms of having authority, I guess, let's not confuse leadership with managing. But I think it is leadership to take that responsibility and to do that, what you think is right and what is right around this particular area. And then once you do become a leader, and so I obviously transitioned to become a leader of teams and of people, and I did have a bit more authority at that point. And it's I think at that point it is to demonstrate and to lead and to show others in the team that this is the way that you can do things and that you can make things happen for others in the organisation. And to lead in that way is to sort of lead through demonstration. You have the courage to do what sometimes isn't easy. But if you know it's right, it makes it easier. And the other part of that, I guess, is don't give up on people. Vanessa told the story. There were definitely times when she had enough, and you needed to pick people up, and that's part of leadership as well, is to pick people up and get them back on the boat and do something meaningful, not just platitudes. It's not about mentoring and saying, oh, well, no, you could try this, or you could do that, you could think about this. I think as a leader, it's actually doing something about it. And so finding, to Vanessa's point earlier, the opportunities to go and speak perhaps. Finding opportunities to find that niche that was there. You know, it's about those discussions that you have with your team members as a leader around being genuinely interested in what they want to do and just bringing their potential to the fore. And, you know, honestly, I don't do it just for the women in the team. I would do it equally for the men in the team. It's just my ethos, I guess. But the other thing I tell people is, you know, you've got to make the pie bigger for everybody. You can't just focus on one group and grow that cohort up and be that at the expense of some other group in the business, because you're not going to have a very harmonious team if you do that. So my ideal is you grow the pie for everybody, but you might accelerate the pie for some people at certain times a bit more than others. But as long as you're increasing everybody's opportunities, I think it's good. So.
Thank you. I like that sort of perception of not only being a champion of change because you're in a role of management, because you're in a perceived role of leadership, but that internalised leadership that each of us can take with us and leading shoulder by shoulder from wherever you are. Talking about wherever you are, I'm going to throw to Alicia, PhD candidate. Yep, I hear you.
Yes.
So you're in the thick of it.
Is that on? Is that working? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Champions of change. Yeah, so from the perspective, I guess, a little bit different. So from a student perspective or somebody a little bit earlier in their sort of career and in their path, I think champions of change are so important to have people in roles of visibility and leadership. You can't really, how can you know going into something if there's like success for you there, or if there's positions for you there, if you don't really see that people are succeeding in that role, or if you see somebody similar to you or someone that's had similar experiences or similar even like issues or gone through similar experiences. Yeah, how can you know if this is a space for you if you don't really see that there are people succeeding for you? So I think that's that diversity and that inclusion, so I think that is really important. Oh, sorry, just kicked a water bottle. In my personal experience, you know, I'm a PhD student now. Before that, I was doing my honours year, and I had my supervisors, 2 out of 3 who were women, encouraged me to think about pursuing a PhD if this was something that I was interested in, and it was something that I was interested in, working in the medtech space. And so I think maybe without that push I may not have considered it as strongly as I had. And now I'm a PhD student. I have 5 supervisors, so 3 academic and 2 industry, yeah. Sometimes it's a lot to balance, but that's okay. So 3 out of the 5 of them are women as well, so that's more than half. And I think that has worked really, really well for us. And that's not to say that I would have had a lesser experience if that wasn't the case, but I think for me personally that has worked really well. And again, just to see people in those leadership roles from a student perspective has been really motivating, and I think really helpful as well to continue with what I'm doing and to know that this is a space that I can work in.
And I'm going to take from what you're saying that you will be carrying forward your own championing of change yourself.
I hope so.
You will be a champion of change.
I hope so. I hope that.
And no doubt you already are a champion of change as well.
I try. But yeah, I do think it's important, yeah, even going forward for me to encourage other people coming into the space, or people maybe who are a little less experienced, to help pass that along, I guess. Yeah.
Lovely. Cassie, I'm going to bring you in. I certainly consider you to be a champion of change, insofar as seeing, becoming aware of an issue that you're facing and doing something about it, stepping forward and stepping into that space of championing change for yourself and others around you. Can I invite you to speak a little bit about champions of change from your perspective? How does that work in industry? How does that work for you?
Yeah, so when I was, I guess, finishing high school and whatnot, you know, I really could have used a champion of change. I knew I wanted to get into the tech side of things, but someone that was losing my vision, you know, I was often told you've got to choose a different career path, don't work at all, or you need to work in a factory. So, you know, I guess ended up having to be my own champion of change, and went, well, screw this, I'll show you I can do this. And, you know, I've been a programmer now for, I think, over 15 years, so I think I've proved a lot of people wrong. But one of the things I guess that, you know, I'm fortunate with the CME project is, you know, like, it's had a lot of like media attention and that sort of thing. And, you know, I can only hope that when people like hear my story or whatever, you know, that people with disability aren't just seen as like, oh, we need to work in a factory, you know, that we can be seen as, yeah, we can be programmers, we can, you know, we can do just as much as anyone else. We just do it a little bit differently with assistive technology. So I can only hope that in all that I do, that, you know, other people, you know, like parents with kids with disability go, okay, like there's still like a future for whatever their kid may want to do.
Absolutely. And did you find, I mean, you've clearly had to be your own champion for yourself, and I'm gathering that you've probably had some people who have been champions for you and with you as well. What do we miss out? If we, from the workplace, what do we miss out when we don't consider, when we're not open to or supportive of women in tech or diversity in tech? What do we risk? What do we miss out on?
Different ideas. You know, like it's one thing, I guess, to read about something like on the internet, you know, about like, you know, how people with disability interact with things. You know, example, at work, you know, we've got a digital kiosk, and there were some accessibility features that had been added to it, and came along and played with it and sort of pulled it apart, and said it's not actually working in terms of accessibility, but here's why. And I was explaining, you know, like, you know, yes, some people like the high contrast. Other people, like me, get, you know, headaches from bright lights. So, you know, we need like a dark mode, and you know, how do we find, you know, well, yes, there's buttons on the screen, but how can I find that when I don't know that it's there? You know, even just like where we place things, and does it have contrast? You know, like I've walked into quite a few things. You know, it's all these lived experiences that unless you're like really in it, you don't know about it. And you know, when we have a diverse team, then we can all bring like ideas and suggestions to the table, and our products become greater for it.
Thank you, Cassie. How would you see we benefit when we do have that diversity? That's for you, Cassie.
How do we benefit?
Oh, sorry. I flipped you around. Alicia, sorry. How do we benefit? Cassie, take us through. How do we benefit? Sorry.
Wait, I'm back again.
Yeah, you're back again. You're on.
I thought I answered it before, but yeah, no.
You did. I wanted to bring in Alicia and give us a bit of a different perspective on how we benefit when we actually do have a diversity of voices and people at the table.
Yeah, I do think everything Cassie said is true. So I don't really have much more to add than that, but you want to make technology, whether it's femtech, which you touched on a little bit earlier, Stephen, or something a bit broader to help everyone. You need to make sure you've got everybody on a team that is going to give that diverse perspective and different life experiences as well, just to make sure that it is going to be something that is benefiting everyone. Because I think if you're not, you're going to bring in bias, right? If you're trying to make a product or technology that's going to benefit everybody, and you've only got a certain group of people working on it, how can you be sure that it's actually going to benefit everybody? Like, it seems pretty self-explanatory to me, but
yeah. But it's there. Tanya, can you add something? Oh, and Richard as well.
I do think it's important when we're talking about diversity to not have a bipolar world of men and women, but we need to think about a range of genders, and we also need to think about a range of backgrounds. So I'm looking at the panel thinking on one level we might be diverse, on another level we actually are not very diverse, and so we need to think about people from a range of backgrounds, a range of countries, people from the global south as well as those from the global north, and a range of languages. And there have been really egregious examples where automated devices couldn't recognise darker skin, or algorithms embed bias against African American men, impacting on whether they are granted their liberty or not. So there are multiple examples where the people around the table weren't diverse enough, but that it's not just limited to gender.
Well, it's a great point, and my point was going to follow on for that, which is, so again, from an experience of having worked across multiple countries around the world, it's how do you elicit that information from people is not the same everywhere. How you get the diverse opinion from someone who may be from Japan versus someone who is loud from Australia or India is a very different model of trying to elicit that nugget of truth that you need from someone is very different depending on where that person hails from or the culture that they were brought up in. So just having people around the table is absolutely, but then the trick is how do you get the information out of the table, which is going to be very different for different types of people that sit around that table.
Anyone else? Yeah. So part of my role in IDS is that. So, you know, we, and we're slowly implementing this in our team, but part of our role is how do we actually test the solutions that we're coming up with, or even test the problem we're trying to solve for, and not even think about the solution yet. And from what we understand from a very diverse group of people that we speak to, what is the best solution for them? And actually linking that back to what we produce. I'm a big advocate for not making assumptions. So, you know, I come from a very different background to probably lots of people in this room, but I don't make assumptions, and I know that people come from a similar background to me are the same as me, right? Everybody's different. And so we've got to make sure that we test out our assumptions as well, and put them to one side and be curious and ask lots of really curious questions so we can learn about people and learn about how they want to use things, but also learn about who they are so we can actually design solutions that suit them as well. Yes, Stephen?
Yeah, so I was just thinking, because clinical trials are pretty good nowadays in trying to make sure that you get diversity in a trial. But we did have someone from the FDA come recently, and they said you can't now in the FDA talk about diversity or diverse groups of people. You have to call them representative. So I guess that kind of leads into the fact that progress, I think we probably always thought that progress was linear, but I think we've realised recently that you can go backwards quite quickly and easily. Yeah, so I know Fabiana said earlier that we should, that we're pretty good, but if we stop, we probably go backwards, we don't stay the same.
That's a really good point. Vanessa, I'm going to ask you to kind of wrap us up a little bit here. And I like a couple of these things. Representation, absolutely, but also curious, this notion of being curious. And as I said, hopefully everyone in the room is tech curious. Whether you are super familiar with the tech, hopefully you're still curious. Whether you're less familiar with the tech, hopefully you're still curious. The best and worst advice for women engaging in the field. Now that, again, that's a very big question, right? But give us a little bit of a snippet, a little window into the best and worst advice that you've heard, and perhaps your own best tip takeaway that you would take away from today.
Some of the worst advice was early on, you know, which was stay in your lane, right? Which, you know, those sorts of things to me, you know, is putting people in a box, right? That's effectively what it is. Some of the best advice that I've been given, and that really is from mentors and those that have been champions for me, is, you know, don't be afraid. Right? And you know, I love the term curious, but volunteer, right? If you see something and you and it sparks an interest in you and that curiosity, volunteer. Don't be afraid. And one of the things that we always say in CISCO is that it's okay to fail. Just make sure you don't fail alone, right? If you're struggling, let somebody else know and they'll help you. And so that gives us that fearlessness to volunteer and take risks. And I love the term curiosity.
Thank you. I think we've got I've reserved a little bit of time for questions because I thought, look at this amazing panel that you have here. Do we have a couple of questions from the floor? We don't have a long period of time, but we've got room for one or two. Is there something else that you'd like us to extend a little bit more into, to answer some other questions, to talk a little bit more about? What's really sparked your curiosity in terms of what you've heard today? If there's no one waving at me, I'm going to give you a minute. There we go. Silence is a really good tool, isn't it, Valerie?
Thank you, Richard. Yes.
No, it was
Doesn't sound like off.
Flick it up.
Okay. I'm hearing, thank you, great panel, a lot of interesting issues, but I'm hearing from you, Vanessa, is really about taking a risk. and don't fail alone. So we sort of tend to think sometimes about how you might fail safely and how you maybe gauge that risk-taking if you are afraid. Have you got any tips about how to stick your toe in the water a bit, or you're just saying be bold?
Well, first is, be transparent, right? And even, in CISCO and externally, and one of the stories I didn't talk about is around that time when I didn't get Distinguished Engineer the first time, I was actually approached by a competitor, and they offered me a lot of money to jump ship. And because I was down, I was like, And then I realised that, okay, this is not a decision I should make in isolation. And so I told Richard, and I was very transparent and honest about it. And there's been other times where I've wanted to try something that I know had probably a 90% chance of actually not working out. And so I wouldn't just, give it a shot. I spoke to Richard, or I spoke to some of the other managers, or even some of the team members that I've had, to get their advice. And then, and even if they said, be a bit cautious, I would take that on board. And then if I still calculated, I would take that risk. So yeah.
Do others want to respond to the same question? The mic is open.
I will. So in my career, I've actually taken quite a few risks. I've left jobs that were very comfortable to go to contract positions because I wanted to learn something different. I wanted to be exposed to different ideas and different thinking. And that's a really big risk, right? I'm a single mum. I've put a lot on the line to make those decisions, but also back yourself in, right? We work with somebody who always talks about how technology is a confidence game, right? You've got to instill confidence in people, make them feel like you know what you're doing and all that sort of stuff. And I'm not saying that you should be falsifying that, but you do know what you're doing. Like, everybody in this room knows what they're doing in their job. They can back themselves in. So I'd highly recommend thinking about that as well. Back yourself in, and find somebody that you're a mentor, or somebody in your life, a bit like Vanessa's done, who will also have you back as well and back you in as well, and someone that you can go and have a conversation with who's honest with you and tells you sometimes maybe what you don't want to hear as well.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Do we have another? Yes.
Thank you. My name is Priyanka. I sit in an interesting intersection of nursing, digital health research and end-of-life, and palliative care in aged care. And the focus of my work really is around looking at digital innovation and data, and how we can utilize these clever innovation to improve care processes and care outcomes. As a nurse, I'm really mindful that majority of the health workforce is more than 50% at least are nurses. The challenge or the experience that I have had when it comes to not just building career in technology, not developing technology, not integrating technology, when we get to the end of implementation and actually utilization to really reach the end game, which is how can we make people's lives, end-of-life care experiences better. We are faced with this structural situation where nurses operate in an environment that is very hierarchical and that's very organized. So, it's either nursing homes or hospitals where policies, what are you allowed to do, not allowed to do, guides almost everything. So while it is very, commendable to be ambitious, sometimes the systems and apparatus within which you operate does not really allow for that flexibility. And then when we look at who uses these, femtech, and who use these, when we talk about digital innovation or innovation in health space, well, inevitably there will be a large nursing cluster that will be either engaging with that, using it, or using or are expected to use it in a way that improves outcomes and improves efficiency. So I guess my question with that long-winded context is, how do we encourage a really big and potentially strong climbing towards advocacy, leadership sort of profession like nursing to do what you did, Vanessa, as an individual, to say, no, as nurses, we actually need to be in, part of this conversation, not just at the time of conceptualization or development or integration part, but we're key players in implementation, but we really need to be a key player all the way through the process. How can a profession look towards making that journey?
So thank you for that question, because that's the question that I'm trying to get lawyers to respond to say, don't wait until the developer or the inventor comes and says, oh, here it all is now, can you tell me what the law is? No, we need to the lawyers in right at the beginning. And the challenge, and so I'll speak from my discipline about the challenge, and maybe that might give you some insights, but the challenge is that when I say to lawyers, oh no, you need to be in these conversations about technology from the beginning, the lawyer says, oh, well, I don't know anything about that. So what can I add to the conversation? I'll just look like I'm silly because I don't know what I'm talking about. And so part of that is having the conversation about interdisciplinarity and moving the boundaries of your profession, and what is your profession going to look like going forward. You're going to need some new skill sets. Now that's really a challenging conversation to have with people who are mid and later career, because they're already expert learners, and now you're saying to them, oh no, you need to develop some new skills. And so part of that conversation has to actually think carefully about the person's identity and how challenging that is for them to say, even though I am an expert, I am an experienced person, I can be in a safe place to be a novice again. And so that's the first answer that I would have. And the second answer that I would have, and this has been my experience when I've sat at the table on national roundtables around automated vehicles or future mobility, and I walk in thinking, I know nothing. And then I sit around the table with all these people who are, all these highfalutin things, and I'm just a lawyer. And I realise, listening to them, they don't actually know that much either. So I would approach from a very human factors, and I'm looking at Valerie now, a human factors approach to say, this is actually attacking people's identity of themselves as a professional, and so start there about the conversation.
Anyone else? That was a lovely response. Would anybody like to add to that? Or we all?
I'd just say, along with Tanya, we had a conversation a little earlier, that the human factors people need to be at the start as well, not the add-on at the end, which is sort of aligned to the UX customer experience that Kirsty's talking about. You need to understand your user and not just what the obvious needs are.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
go.
A bit of a counter. I love a counter argument. I think the other part is sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and so there needs to be a bit of sometimes there needs to be some innovation and invention that comes that then sparks the interest to the next step as well. So we've got to be careful not to always think that what we know now is all that we'll ever know. I think we need to also appreciate that some people have ideas, and they may fail or they may succeed, but get into them as early as you can as well, I would say.
Push and pull.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a couple of things that I'm going to make sure we've covered. Let's see if we have some takeaways for today. Have we been reminded that women are actually more connected to tech than we might realise? When we think about women in tech, and we can look at the statistics of women in tech, and now we realise that tech is all around us. We're all in tech in some kind of way. So just that reminder that we're more connected than we think, which also means that we realise that the tech is broader than we might have thought. Tech is not a thing that sits over there, right? It is literally... I'm probably one of the few in the room who's wearing what I sometimes call an actual watch, right? But I like it back like that. Be inspired to lean into the tech world. My goodness, if you've not been inspired to lean into the tech world today, I'm not sure what's moving your needle. To be empowered to ask more questions, to step up, to step forward, and to ask more questions, and be the person in the room who says, actually, I don't know. And that's the space that I'm living in myself at the moment. I don't come from a technology background. And then our funding today comes through the Thriving at Flinders University initiative, and so it would be very remiss of me to not suggest that today I hope that you've all found a way to help yourselves and help each other to thrive at Flinders. And one of the things that we did when we put this event together is we thought about, okay, what helps us thrive in our workplace? And what helps us thrive in our workplace is when we are connected to our communities of knowledge and practice and our networks of people like us who do things that are aligned with what we do. What a good segue, if I say so myself. I do believe that Belle has some presents for us in just a moment, little gift for all our speakers. In a moment, we'll move into the final part of today. We are actually going to lose Vanessa. We have to put her on a plane. So we'll just let you all know, because when you see her popping out the door, you'll understand it's not personal. We're going to move into having some networking. Yeah, if you want to pass those out, thank you. We'll move into some networking, and you'll notice that everybody on their badge has the answer to the question that you were asked when you registered, which is what's the technology that you're either working with or in, or that you're curious about. And what we'd like you to do is go and find the people around you, amongst us all, that have something to offer you, that you have something to offer. Connect in and put everything that we've just said just now into practice. And will you please join me in giving a very round of applause to our panellists.